The morning my brother showed up at my door with a bouquet of grocery store carnations and a manila folder full of paperwork, I should have known something was wrong. He never brought flowers. I remember standing in my kitchen doorway in my robe, coffee in hand, watching him smile that wide, practiced smile. The one he used on car dealership customers, the one that never quite reached his eyes. And thinking he needs something. He always needed something. But I was 31 years old, and my mother had been dead for exactly 11 days, and I was too hollowed out to trust my own instincts. "I made you breakfast," I said, because that's what our mother would have done. He said, "We need to talk about the house." I should have closed the door. My name is Nora. I'm the younger of 2 kids, and for most of my life, I believed that meant I owed my brother something. Deference, maybe, or the benefit of the doubt that comes automatically to firstborns. My brother's name is Garrett. He's 43, 8 years older than me, and for 8 years before I was born, he was the sun that our entire family orbited around. When I arrived, I think I disrupted something he decided was already his. He never forgave me for it. Not really. Though for years I convinced myself I was imagining things. Our mother, Diane, spent her whole life trying to keep the peace between us. She was one of those women who absorbed other people's tension into her own body and smiled through it. She taught 3rd grade for 30 years. She made her own jam. She kept a prayer journal, and when she died of a stroke at 68, suddenly, without warning, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, she left behind a house in Brenham, Texas, that was worth, depending on the market and who you asked, somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000. She also left behind a will. A clear, notarized, unambiguous will. Half to Garrett. Half to me. I didn't know it then, but Garrett had already decided that wasn't going to work for him. Here's what you need to understand about my brother. He has spent his entire adult life operating at the edge of his income. Not below it, he was never actually poor, but always right at the limit of what he could spend before the next paycheck or commission check arrived to bail him out. He financed everything: cars, furniture, vacations. When he got divorced 6 years ago, he refinanced his condo twice to cover the settlement. I found all of this out later, piece by piece, the way you find out things about people you thought you knew. What I knew at the time was that he called me 3 times in the week after Mom died, which was more than he'd called in the previous 3 months combined, and every conversation circled back, eventually, to the house. "She would have wanted us to handle it quickly," he said once. "She would have wanted us not to fight," he said another time, which was rich because I hadn't been fighting at all. And then, 11 days after the funeral, he was at my door with carnations and paperwork. I poured him coffee and sat across from him at my kitchen table. I was still in my robe. My eyes were swollen. I had been crying every morning when I woke up and remembered, in that first conscious second, that she was gone. He pushed the folder toward me. "It's just a quitclaim deed," he said. "Standard stuff. You sign over your interest in the property to me. I handle the sale, and we split the proceeds 50-50 after expenses. It's faster. Cleaner. Avoids probate delays." I looked at the papers. Then I looked at him. Why would I sign over my interest if we're splitting the money anyway? He had an answer ready. He always had answers ready. Because if we both have to sign off on every decision, it slows everything down. Real estate attorneys, appraisers, they work faster when there's one clear owner. I already have a buyer interested. Cash offer. But they need clear title within 60 days, and if we're both on the deed, one of us gets cold feet or misses a signing and the whole thing falls apart. It sounded almost reasonable. That was the thing about Garrett. He was almost always reasonable. "Let me read it first," I said. Something moved behind his eyes. Quick. Barely there. "Of course," he said. "Take your time." I didn't sign it that day. I told him I needed a week. He said, "Sure, absolutely, no rush." And he left the folder on my table and hugged me at the door and said he'd check in soon, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time after he left, reading and rereading the document, feeling a low, persistent hum of something I couldn't name yet. I called my college roommate, Priya, who had gone to law school and was now doing estate work in Austin. Not asking for professional advice, I told myself I was just venting. I described the deed, what it said, what Garrett had told me. She was quiet for a moment. "Nora," she said, "a quitclaim deed would transfer your ownership completely. If he sold the house after that, he would not be legally obligated to give you a single dollar. The line between us was completely silent. The verbal 50-50 agreement means nothing, she said. Nothing enforceable. If he sold it and kept everything, you would have almost no recourse. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor specifically, it just seemed closer. He brought carnations, I said, which made no sense, but Priya understood me. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't call Garrett that day. Or the next. I needed to think, and I needed to think clearly, which meant I could not be in the middle of one of his conversations where he smoothed everything over and made me feel like I was being paranoid. Instead, I called my mother's estate attorney, a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had drafted Mom's will 2 years ago. I told her what Garrett had asked me to do. She confirmed what Priya had said. She also told me something else. Garrett had already called her office 3 times since the funeral, asking questions about the probate timeline. He had specifically asked whether there was any way to expedite the process if one heir signed over their interest. He asked if it had to be voluntary, Patricia said carefully. I want you to know that I told him yes, absolutely it had to be voluntary, and that ended the conversation. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my feet. He had asked if it had to be voluntary. Not whether it was common, not whether it was practical, whether it had to be. I went back through the last year of my relationship with my brother with different eyes after that conversation. I thought about the Thanksgiving where he'd mentioned, casually, that Mom's house needed a new roof, and it might be smarter to just sell rather than keep sinking money into it, even though the roof was fine. I thought about the Christmas where he'd asked me, just in passing, whether I'd ever thought about moving closer to the city, away from Brenham. He'd been planting seeds for a long time. I just hadn't been watching the garden. I made a decision. I would not confront him. Not yet. If he knew I was suspicious, he'd adjust. Find a new angle, a new approach. Garrett was good at adjusting. Instead, I did something I'd never done in 31 years of being his sister. I started documenting everything, every text, every voicemail. I started keeping a notes app entry after every conversation with timestamps. It sounds paranoid. I know. It felt paranoid. But Patricia had a phrase she used when I called her back. Protect the paper trail. I wrote that on a sticky note and put it on my refrigerator. Protect the paper trail. He texted me on day 8. Hey, following up on the deed stuff. Buyer is getting anxious. Can we meet? I said. Can you remind me what the cash offer amount is? Want to make sure we're getting fair value? He replied with a number. 410,000. I had already gotten my own appraisal done. Quietly. Through a different firm. Their number was 442,000. I didn't say that. I just said, sounds good. Let me look over everything once more, and I'll get back to you. 3 days later, he showed up at my house unannounced. This time, no flowers. He knocked twice and then just opened the door, because we always had that kind of open house policy growing up, and something about that, the ease of it, the entitlement of it, made me angrier than anything else had. I was in the neighborhood, he said. I'm in the middle of something, I said. He sat down anyway. He talked for 40 minutes about Mom, about the house, about his own finances, dropping just enough that I could hear the stress under the surface. He mentioned his condo association dues. He mentioned a car payment. He mentioned that the divorce had hit him harder than people realized. Then he said, I need us to move on this, Nora. I really do. I need this to work out. I need, not we need. I need. I'll let you know soon, I said. I promise. After he left, I sat in the exact spot he'd been sitting in, as if I could understand something better from his angle. And I thought about my mother, who had spent her entire life trying to protect both of us from the worst of each other. She'd left us each half because she believed in fairness. Because she'd raised us to believe that fairness mattered. I thought about what he was trying to take from her too. Not just from me. From her. That was when I decided I was done being passive about it. I called Patricia the next morning and told her I wanted to go through probate the standard way. No shortcuts. No quitclaim deed. I was exercising my full rights as a co-heir, and I wanted everything by the book. She sounded, I thought, quietly relieved. Then I called a different attorney. A litigator this time. Someone Patricia recommended named James Whitfield, who specialized in estate disputes and fraud. I sat in his office for 90 minutes. and I laid out everything. The deed, the texts, the discrepancy in appraisal numbers, the call Patricia had told me about where Garrett asked if my signing had to be voluntary. James was quiet for a moment when I finished. The question about voluntariness is significant, he said. It suggests he was at minimum considering coercive options. Now, that alone doesn't constitute fraud, but if he was also misrepresenting the sale price to you, we're in different territory. He told me the offer was $410,000, I said. My appraisal came in at $442. Did he give you anything in writing about the offer? I pulled out my phone and showed him the text. James smiled, but not the warm kind. Okay, here's what I'd like you to do. The plan wasn't complicated. That was the thing about it. Legal traps rarely are. They just require patience, and patience had become, over the past few weeks, the thing I was best at. I texted Garrett. I said I was ready to move forward. I said I had some questions about the process, but that I was willing to meet with his real estate attorney if that would help. And could he set that up? He responded within 4 minutes. Absolutely, yes, I'll get that scheduled. This is great news. He set it for the following Thursday at the offices of a real estate attorney downtown. I told him I'd be there. What I didn't tell him was that James Whitfield would also be there, and that I had already provided James with every text, every document, every timestamp in my notes app, and that James had already been in contact with the Texas Department of Housing and had flagged the discrepancy in the represented sale price, and that the meeting Thursday wasn't going to go the way Garrett expected. I wore my mother's earrings that day, small pearl studs she'd gotten for her 40th birthday and worn almost every day after. I don't know why that felt important. It just did. Garrett was already there when I arrived, sitting next to a man he introduced as his real estate attorney, a soft-spoken guy named Nothing I Can Remember because he barely spoke. Garrett was relaxed. That was the word for it. Physically, visibly relaxed, the way you are when you think you're about to cross a finish line. I sat down. James came in 2 minutes later. I watched my brother's face register the presence of someone he didn't recognize. Then he looked at the briefcase. Then he looked at me. This is James Whitfield, I said. He's my attorney. Garrett's expression didn't collapse all at once. It sort of dissolved, layer by layer, like ice in room temperature water. The relaxation went first, then the confidence, then something else, something that might have been calculation, working out rapidly how bad this was going to be. James placed a folder on the table. He explained, calmly and without any drama whatsoever, that he had documentation indicating the cash offer Garrett had represented to me was inconsistent with the verified appraisal and with records from the actual buyer, whom James had also contacted. The actual offer on the table was $438,000, not $410,000. Garrett had been planning to pocket $28,000 off the top before any split. He also explained that the quitclaim deed Garrett had asked me to sign, under the circumstances in which it had been presented, during a grief period with a misrepresentation of material facts, could constitute fraud. Garrett's attorney leaned over and whispered something to him. Garrett said, "This is a misunderstanding." "What part?" James asked. Silence. The loudest silence I had ever sat inside of. Louder than the graveside at our mother's funeral. Louder than the phone call when I found out she was gone. That silence had weight. I felt it pressing against my sternum. "The deed was just a suggestion," Garrett said finally. "You asked the estate attorney whether your sister's signature had to be voluntary," James said. "That's in writing." More silence. Garrett turned and looked at me for the first time since I'd sat down. Really looked, and I think he was searching for something. Some trace of the little sister who would smooth this over, who would give him the benefit of the doubt, who would let it go because it was easier. The one who thought she owed him something just for existing. I don't know what my face gave him, but it wasn't that. Garrett did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. Real life doesn't always deliver the neat resolution of a courtroom sentencing. What happened was this. He signed a binding legal agreement, witnessed and notarized, in which he acknowledged the correct sale price, agreed to an equal split of all proceeds with 0 deductions beyond documented and jointly approved expenses, and agreed that any future disputes would go directly to arbitration with an independent third party. He also repaid me from his share the equivalent of the difference he had attempted to misrepresent, the $28,000, split, meaning $14,000 came back to me directly. His attorney told him it was the best outcome available, given everything James had documented. I signed the probate paperwork in Patricia's office 3 weeks later. The house sold for $435,000 in the end, just under the full appraisal, which Patricia said was normal. My share, after legitimate closing costs, was just over $210,000. I cried in the parking lot of her office building, not because I was sad about the money, though I will not pretend the money wasn't a relief, because I'm 31 and I have student loans and a savings account that needed it. I cried because of what the money was. It was my mother's house. It was 37 years of mortgage payments, and a garden she spent every Saturday in, and the kitchen where she taught me to make pie crust in the bedroom where I slept during every holiday until I was 22. It was her, and someone had tried to take half of it from me while I was still raw with missing her. I cried for that. And then I drove home. Garrett and I have not spoken since that Thursday. Not one word. He sent a single text message 2 weeks after the meeting that said, "I hope you know what you've done to this family." I read it. I did not respond. I sat with it for a while because I'm human and he's still my brother, and there's a version of me that spent her entire childhood wanting him to just like her, and that version isn't completely gone. But she's quieter now. What I know is this: I did not blow up my family. He did. He did it the moment he decided that my grief was an opportunity. He did it the moment he asked whether my signature had to be voluntary. He did it when he chose the carnations as a prop. I have a therapist I've been seeing since Mom died. At one of our sessions, maybe a month after everything settled, I told her I felt guilty. That was the specific word I used, guilty. As if I had done something wrong by protecting myself. She asked me what I would tell a friend who had been in the same situation. I thought about it. I'd tell her she had every right, I said. "Okay," my therapist said. "So tell yourself. I want to say something to you directly before I'm done. Not a speech. I'm not interested in speeches. Just a question. Who in your life has been treating your trust as a resource to extract? Who has been watching for your vulnerable moments the way a contractor watches for a house to go on the market? We tell ourselves that family is different, that the people who grew up with us, who shared our parents and our holidays and our childhood bedrooms, couldn't be capable of the kind of cold calculation I'm describing. But love and manipulation are not mutually exclusive. People can love you in some partial, complicated way and still choose to exploit you when the stakes get high enough for them. The document on my kitchen table was real. The carnations were real. The question about whether my signature had to be voluntary was real. The question about whether my signature had to be voluntary was real. And the woman who finally, after 31 years, stopped waiting for her brother to become the person she needed him to be, that's real too. My mother left me something. It took me a minute to fight for it. But I did. Her name was Diane. She made her own jam, and she kept a prayer journal, and she taught 3rd grade for 30 years. And she raised a daughter who, eventually, learned to protect herself. I think she would have wanted that. I'm Nora, and I'm done explaining myself. People ask me sometimes if I feel bad about how it ended with my brother, and I understand why they ask. He's family. We grew up in the same house. We lost the same mother 11 days before any of this happened. There's supposed to be loyalty in that. There's supposed to be something that holds. But here's what I've come to understand. Not as a lesson someone handed me, but as something I lived my way into. What Garrett did wasn't a mistake made under grief. He didn't slip. He planned. He called Patricia's office 3 times before he ever showed up at my door with those carnations. He had the deed drafted before I'd finished clearing out Mom's kitchen. He asked, in writing, on a recorded call, whether my signature had to be voluntary. That's not a grieving brother making a bad judgment call. That's a person who looked at my pain and saw a window. And that's the thing about choices. They have weight. Not in some cosmic, abstract sense, just in the plain, practical sense that decisions leave marks. Garrett made his decisions over months, maybe longer, and those decisions shaped everything that followed. My decision to call Priya instead of signing that day shaped everything too. Neither of us could take those back once they were made. That's just how it works. The shape of what happens to you is partly the shape of what you chose when no one was watching. I think about my mother a lot when I think about this. She was the most ethical person I knew, not because she talked about ethics, but because she was consistent in the small moments, the moments that don't count for anything visible. She would have returned an extra $1 if a cashier miscounted. She graded her students' work on the same standard regardless of whether she liked the kid. She did the right thing when it cost her something, and she did it quietly, without needing anyone to notice. That's not weakness. That is a specific, practiced kind of strength, the kind that requires you to decide, over and over, who you're going to be. I spent years thinking I had to earn Garrett's approval. I made myself smaller, more agreeable, quicker to let things go. And I want to be honest, that wasn't strength either. That was fear dressed up as kindness. There's a difference between being generous and being unwilling to protect yourself because conflict feels dangerous. I had to learn that difference the hard way, in the middle of the worst month of my life. What I have now, and I don't say this lightly, is a kind of clarity I didn't have before. I know what I will accept from people. I know how to read the gap between what someone says and what the paperwork actually does. I know that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of love. It is sometimes the most honest thing you can do. Honest about what the relationship actually is, rather than what you need it to be. Garrett got a settlement he didn't deserve to be that clean. I got my mother's money, and the knowledge that I fought for it. I got to sit across that table in her pearl earrings and not flinch. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something similar, someone circling your vulnerability, someone who shows up with flowers when they need something, I want you to hear this clearly. Your instincts are not paranoia. Document everything. Find your Priya, your Patricia, your James, and do not sign anything until you understand exactly what you're signing away. You are allowed to protect what belongs to you,